There we go. Sorry, just stream things. You know how it
No,
goes.
I'm chilling. The frankly, the Twitch verse seems a lot more pressure than the YouTube space, for
Really?
sure. Oh yeah, God, you have to like entertain a live audience and get people to watch and I don't know, be funny. I just have to talk into a camera and then post the video and maybe people will watch
Do you
it.
never stream on YouTube?
I did a couple of times, but I found I didn't enjoy it as much. So I'm kind of I will eventually do it, but it's going to be after I get bigger and commit to the whole thing, if that ever happens.
I gotcha. And yeah, just so we're clear, you're fine with me streaming this?
Yeah, do it.
Oh, okay,
Do it.
good, good.
Yeah.
Um, so some of the people in my chat are asking, like, what are your politics? Do you wanna just give a summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised by conservatives, but I'm probably temperamentally liberal. I consider myself center right. What makes me right wing is often guns, a few chud takes on it, immigration and abortion, and in general, yeah, I mean that's pretty much what makes me right wing. Economics, I still have my defenses of capitalism, but it's not from a principled standpoint. It's more from a utilitarian standpoint of what works and what works for most people and what's been proven to work and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually sympathetic to like market stock arguments, but as we discussed in a Discord text chat, I am skeptical of our ability to create a utopian, and utopian I get it's a straw man, but a socialist society without violence. And violence is probably the main thing that I've studied my entire life. I'm a former law enforcement officer and also a former Marine. So that's my concern, is that we're jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Gotcha. Okay. I feel like that was that was a really good rundown of your politics. I don't think we actually. I think that we might end up agreeing on quite a bit.
It's okay. You can call me an asshole if you need to. if we
I don't think I would. You seem like a really nice person. Like that's honestly one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because we were on a panel together a little while ago, and you just seemed really well put together with your arguments, and like you were coming from a genuine like place of wanting to improve society somewhat. And that's, I'm willing to be allies with people who want to do that. So I figured it'd be worth talking
um,
with you.
Yeah, and I'm not a rhetorician. I know there's a lot of people who are rhetoricians in this space where they think about the arguments and their political agenda and what they want to advocate for, and then they just think what will be the best argument that will play to my audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not the way that I think or the way that I can portray myself. So oftentimes I feel like an asshole because I keep getting invited to these debates, whether it's on Prime's channel or Dylan's channel or something like that. And they're like, "Oh well, this is the way we set up the argument." I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna follow the conversation where it goes. I'm gonna ask the questions. I'm gonna listen to the people that are here. If I feel like there's an asshole take or something that I don't like, then I'm gonna call it out. But otherwise, I'll try to be as inquisitive as possible. And that's what I liked. If people haven't watched the panel that we were on, that's what I really liked, because you particularly just like I don't know, like academics or sources or information and all that kind of stuff just came on super strong. And that what was really cool about that panel was pretty much everybody was smart and knew what the fuck they were talking about, which is that's my favorite kind of conversation.
Yeah. Like I like to flatter myself by thinking that like a lot of my positions are backed up by like empirical data, or pretty like follows from point A to point B style
Mm-hmm.
arguments. Like politically, I align more like libertarian socialist. So I'm actually farther left than like a market socialist would be, politically. But I make arguments for market socialism because I think that that's something that I can back up with empirical data.
Wow, political pragmatism. Who fucking knew?
I know,
And,
right?
I'm sorry for swearing so much.
Oh,
Am I allowed to
it's
swear?
you are allowed to swear as much as you want, friend.
Okay, yeah, so the former Marine thing should have tipped off that profanity is like laced my entire language, but even before that, I was a fairly profane person. And that's a kind of like socialist that I can work with who are doing a utilitarian calculus about what will actually improve society.
Hmm.
They think they've arrived at the solution, but then they're like politically pragmatic. The people that I can't stand, one, woke scolds obviously just drive me up the fucking wall because I'm not a politically correct person. I've had some pretty bad takes in my life before. So if I'm pleading at the church of woke scolds, I will have plenty of sins to atone for. So I don't feel like atoning for those sins. I feel like articulating myself as best as I can, and basically working with the people who are more politically pragmatic.
Hmm.
And then the other people that I can't stand are basically like tankies or super simplistic socialists who just think like, oh, we can just jump the fucking curb and just drive straight into socialism, and there's not going to be any chaos or free fall or economic fallout or violence or anything like that. Or they don't care about the violence or the economic free fall, and I think that's what scares me, frankly, about socialists or lefties.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that that's like those are valid concerns, right? Like we're talking about something that changes like the fundamental fabric of society, and if you look at history, and like I studied history as part of my educational background, like when feudalism fell, it's not like feudalism went smoothly into capitalism, right?
Yeah,
You look at like the French Revolution, for example. Like people literally beheaded the kings and queens in the streets.
yeah.
That's I recognize that like capitalism is better than feudalism, right? But like you know if it
The jumps between societies are not always smooth.
right, and if
Well,
if at all possible, I would prefer to avoid a scenario where like people are getting beheaded in the streets.
preferably.
Yeah, that my preferred politics is
mild
avoiding that.
mild preference for less beheadings. Like
Right.
it's and
I know
that's
it's a
what's
bold
funny is
stance.
yeah. See, but like ironically, because of the spaces that we work in, I mean it's a hobby, but we work in these spaces, right?
Yeah.
So it is a bold stance because like a sense of like political pragmatism or incrementalism or a broad look at history and like the bend of like our goals that we want to get to. That is a bold stance because I mean, if you hop on Twitter or Twitch or whatever, the things that are getting the most attention are guillotines and hammers and sickles and kill the landlords and all that kind of shit.
Hmm.
So I know it's designed to get a reaction, but what bugs me is a lot of people are very young and very naive, and I'm pretty much a boomer at this point. I'm an older millennial. So what scares me is like Zoomers who don't know that it's memes, or they don't know what they're asking for as far as violence or political change or anything like that. So I'm an incrementalist. I am a wet blanket. I am a centrist, which is very boring for a lot of people, but it's also refreshing for some people when they're used to dealing with ideologues.
Well, yeah, and like you brought up tankies, and I have no problem with people who are lefties. Like I said at the beginning, like I'm a libertarian socialist. Like I'm very far left. But my issue with tankies are that they are complicit with like authoritarianism, and they just kind of justify it with like the aesthetic of leftist things. Like it's like, oh yeah, we're fine with China running concentration camps. It's like what
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
what the
based
fuck?
concentration camp.
Yeah. Yeah, like so like my basic stance is whether it's in a capitalist nation or whether it's in China, I have the bold stance of yeah, concentration camps are bad wherever they
Yeah,
are.
yeah, new hot take.
Yeah, right. And so I don't like people who are like extremely pro revolution either. I think that maybe like to a certain extent there's like a value in having people who are like willing to take those steps or willing to entertain those thoughts. But I also think like from a pragmatic perspective, like those aren't the kind of people who are going to win over centrists or like liberals or moderate conservatives. Like no one's going to join your revolution to like have blood in the streets of America. Like
and
yeah.
it happened. I don't know if it happened specifically on that panel, or it might have happened on like a next one or whatever. But like I was literally like for the first two questions of the panel, we were fine. And then on the third question of the panel, like I just jumped like so far right, I might as well jumped out of my skin. Where I was just like, if you cross that line, like I'm going with these guys, and like that's kind of where the things that I talk about, they're not just memes. The talking points that I might have ingested from like a conservative upbringing or something like that. When I say you know, equality of opportunity, I don't mean let's fuck over brown and black people through like weird economic funding of schools.
Mm-hmm.
When I say, the my Second Amendment spiel, it's not because I only want guns for white people. It's because I literally want, like, I think there's a utilitarian calculus to having a civilian population that is capable of holding their government accountable through violence.
Mm-hmm.
And in my utilitarian calculus, that's a valuable thing that even though there's a whole bunch of horrific gun deaths in the United States, it's something that I hold dear, and not because I'm, meaning or trying to propagandize anything. I really do believe that it makes the world a worse place in some respects, but on the long term keeps a balance that's necessary to keep the world functional.
And like for me when it comes to guns, like I take a different utilitarian calculus. Like
Mm.
I personally don't like guns. Like if I lived in a perfect world, right, I would want them like melted down into slag. We can make them into like cool sculptures or something, you know. But I also recognize that we don't live in that kind of a perfect world, right? Like and for me, I would much rather tackle issues that reduce gun deaths from different perspectives if the issue of like gun ownership is going to be one that is so divisive and like politically nuclear, you know?
Yeah.
I would much rather focus on like decommodifying mental health care. I think that would do a lot to help reduce gun violence. And you know what? Like maybe after we get to like a market socialist society, then we can put, gun ownership back on the table. Maybe it will be a different conversation then, but I'm willing to table it until some point in the far future after we've made society better in a whole host of other ways.
Yeah, in my caveman perspective on the world might be obsolete in 500 or 1,000 years, but
Right.
we're not there right now, and that's kind of where what was it? I was literally, so I watch lefties all the time because I feel like I need to refine my argument. So I was literally watching That Dang Dad, which is he's an ex-cop, lefty YouTuber, or whatever, and he was talking about like eliminating the carceral state and what does abolishing police actually mean and all that kind of shit. And basically, I had like a reflexive negative reaction where I was just like, fuck that. Like, I was just like, no, no, we don't live in this utopia. It's not going to happen. But then I was kind of thinking like, set that out as like a 500-year goal or like 1,000-year goal where science and technology and mental health and automation have taken us to parts of the world that we can't even calculate in our heads right now because it's literally unfathomable. If you were looking at the past century, we have access to technologies, including video chat, that would be unfathomable to somebody 150 years ago.
Yeah.
So 500 years ago, maybe we'll have mental health so down that we can just eliminate incarceration as a thing. I don't think we'll ever get there because I have a more caveman brain who thinks that my caveman impulses are probably more common in society than people want to give credit for.
Mm-hmm.
But I leave that to the future generations. I can only deal with my generation.
Yeah, and like I also think that there's a good chance that like technology and knowledge will advance much faster than it has in the past 150 years too. So like who knows in like 40 years what the world's going to look like. 40 years ago we barely had cell phones, right?
Yeah.
Like and now we all carry around a device in our pockets that has like the sum access to the sum total of human knowledge.
Smartphones and cell phones are so ubiquitous that they're nearly ubiquitous in what would be considered developing countries.
Yeah.
That's how common they are. That's insane. Like you're talking about countries like what we consider like authoritarian theocracies, and everybody's walking around with a smartphone, and it's like holy crap. Like the information, and I literally just posted a video today just kind of talking about conflicts with jihadism and kind of like Islamophobia and Islam and all that kind of stuff. And I would like to pat myself on the back and say it was a very nuanced video. But globalism and global information access is going to change the face of the world in a way that we can't even conceptualize.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the work that atheist advocates are doing right now might just be, and like I'm not an atheist, but I'm like a deist. I don't believe in like a personal god or a specific religion. But a lot of the work that secularization we think needs to be forced might actually be evolutionary or rational based off of these technological developments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm hopeful for. But I could just be being utopian myself.
Well, and so like, and that's the thing, right? Like, you mentioned it there briefly, like evolutionary. So like I call myself an evolutionary socialist, which means that I want to work through democracy because I believe in democracy. I believe in freedom. I believe in being able to present.
What an asshole!
I know, right? Like and this is like going back to like revolution, right? Like I would much prefer to work through democracy. Like in the Middle Ages, when there were problems with government, like people went into civil wars. That's the revolution of democracy, is that we have peaceful transfers of power, we have peaceful ways to debate really important issues, and like I would rather be able to put my ideas forward in a democracy and get them passed that way than through like revolutionary violent means, right? So I prioritize having good arguments for like socialist positions so that we can, whether it's relatively quickly or over a longer period of time, improve society somewhat, like
Yeah.
be nice
Yeah,
to
and
improve society.
What's interesting about that too is I feel like a lot of the propaganda was gate kept by like the big three, and by that I mean before cable television and before the internet, the United States of America literally had like 3 broadcasting channels for TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure we had like 2 or 3 national newspapers that you could get in every single city, but besides that you were reliant on your local newspaper. So propaganda was a lot easier to control, and what you're seeing through the internet and the information age is kind of the democratization of media. Now that comes with like a lot of really bad shit because basically we have a lot of negative actors, I don't know, bad faith actors. But what it also comes with is that the propaganda doesn't stick as hard because it's so easy to catch bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm hopeful for, because a lot of the tradcons and conservatives, they harken back aesthetically to the 1950s and 1960s. But the 1950s and the 1960s were an economic product of the progressive tax and redistributive economic programs of the 1940s and the war. So the health and well-being and the nuclear family and the cars and the distributed wealth and all that kind of shit was actually more from a what do you call that, the Scandinavian capitalist model. I forget what
Oh yeah,
social democracy, I guess.
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so basically like using the economy to make everybody's lives better.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happened is, we just propagandize bootstrapping. But what's happened to my generation and the Zoomer generation is they're bootstrapping as hard as they can, and it's not working. You can't bootstrap your way out of $7 an hour minimum wage.
Right.
So that's where I think that's going to be bullshit, and a lot of lefty policies are going to pass because of necessity and because propaganda isn't going to work anymore in the age of the information. Yeah, in the information age.
Yeah, it's a really complicated issue too, right? Because like a lot of the propaganda comes from I would say to a certain extent like a justified misunderstanding of what socialism is, right? Like and I'm fond of just going over this really quick just so like everyone kind of gets on the same page, but like, so there's evolutionary socialism and revolutionary socialism, and those are ideas going back like before Marx. Socialism predates Marx. Marx didn't invent socialism, and essentially what ended up happening was Russia came along and fought through several different wars. Stalin ended up in power. And the idea of socialism is that either through evolutionary means or revolutionary means, you take control over the state, and then you can use the power of the state to, enact socialism, basically transition from capitalism to socialism. But Stalin came into power in the USSR and basically said, I have control over the state. This is what socialism is now.
Yeah.
And so, like, he never transferred the USSR into socialism. And the same with Mao, the same with a lot of other countries that have been nominally declared socialist. And this is something that is a huge stumbling block when I found when talking about socialism, because so many people just equate it with an authoritarian regime that centralizes the economy and then basically participates in state capitalism, which isn't
Yeah,
socialism.
very nice. Please face wall.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
well,
I'm virulently anti-authoritarian. That's not what I want at all.
yeah, and that's I made a video. Po- I, I guess it's ableist to me, but politics, and I'll refrain from the ableist term, but politics for a certain group of people, and the gist of it basically being that the concentration of power is not great for anybody, and we
Hmm.
seem to, at least so far in human history, we seem to enact hierarchy wherever we go.
Hmm.
And we also seem to, whenever an oligarch or a monarch gets in power, they basically do whatever they want to do in order, whatever social or propagandistic pretext, to reinforce that power. So even though the communist societies or the socialist societies of the 20th century claimed, we're going to institute the dictatorship of the proletariat, and we're going to nationalize all these resources, and we're going to have more equitable distribution of what XYZ. What ended up happening was just this justified or self-justifying hierarchy of oligarchs who maintain power for themselves.
Hmm.
And I think that's my biggest fear, because when I see a lot of idealists who want to completely revolutionize society and they don't care how power is distributed within that new society, I see a power vacuum that's going to be capitalized on by the worst people imaginable. And if you look at Mao Zedong, if you look at Joseph Stalin, they were people willing to commit violence in the name of their ideology while existing in a power vacuum. And once they seized power, they didn't give it up, and they used whatever force they needed to in order to continue justifying their political factions' power,
Hmm.
which is just new monarchy.
Yeah.
It's secular monarchy.
Well, and that's part of the issue that I have with capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have numerous studies now. A notable one is oh gosh, what's it called here? Have it right here somewhere. Where did I put it? Do, do, do. Ah, here we go. It's called Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. And basically, what it found, it's from 2014, is that no matter how much public support a position has, a policy position has, it has a 30% chance of being passed. So whether or not it has 0% support, 30% chance of being passed. If it has 100% support, 30% chance of being passed. And a lot of this is because public opinion has stopped mattering as much because lobbying has kind of replaced public opinion. Like the money of capital has kind of come in to pervert our democratic process. And like as somebody who values freedom and values democracy, I have a huge problem with that, and I'm not sure that there's anything that we have found to be able to stop that from happening, because the systems of capitalism encourage them to go beyond the law if they can get an advantage for doing so, you know?
Well,
Um,
and maybe this is my cishet white normie privilege showing, but my reflexive defense or my reflexive answer, even though because I don't value democracy as much, not that I do value representative democracy, I value representative democracy, republicanism. I also value like the Bill of Rights and like the liberal conception of like human equality and all that kind of stuff.
mhm.
So there's a lot of things that I do value, but I'm also worried about the tyranny of the mob. Maybe that's my conservative upbringing, but the thing that I'm afraid of, just getting back to my fears, is the kind of like kids all wanting, electing the student body president who says that they're all going to fucking get pizza
Mhm.
and they're going to nap for 6 hours a day and like all that kind of shit. So that's always my fear, because it might just be a meme with socialists and a meme with lefties, the anti-work communists.
Hmm.
But that's what I'm afraid of genuinely, is perverse incentives. Because I'm not saying America is perfect, but I look outside my house. Almost everybody has a car. Almost everybody has a place to live. Power works. There's no outages. Violence, while prevalent in some communities, is not prevalent across the entire country. There's a lot of things that are going right, and we love to focus on what's going wrong.
Hmm.
So my fear with democracy is voting in very popular measures that have very toxic effects.
Right.
So yeah, that's my fear.
Well, so I feel like that's a valid fear, right? But we also have people who can study these things. Like we have data to back up certain positions. Like, maybe if we didn't have PG&E in California being a private company, and we instead had it accountable to the public, maybe California wouldn't be burning down every year from fires started by PG&E's lack of maintenance, right? Like they've skimped on maintenance for like 20
Oh,
years in order to profit more,
mhm.
and that has disastrous effects to the tune of like hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars when towns and cities burn down.
Yeah.
Um, so like these are the kinds of things that I think about and talk about when it comes to like, hey, why do we have privatized electricity, for example? Like, it's not like you can have it's not like cities have like two competing power plants, right? Like, no, power plants are usually monopolies, and so why do we let them run for profit when that's just getting like more inefficiency, putting people at risk, and generally like you know not as accountable to the public. Like these are things where like I'm like I feel like there are good arguments for having these things be accountable to the people they serve.
And this is the exact reason why I'm a statist. Holy shit, you just killed it. So the I get so frustrated with so I probably went by the political identification of libertarian for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
and then I tried to call myself a libertarian in libertarian spaces, and then they called me a statist bootlicking idiot. So I kind of realized, well, like, okay, well, what's the role of the state in the society? And of course, I could find all these criticisms of the state, but I didn't really find like I didn't find a justification for it. And then as I slowly realized, it's like it's to represent the vested interests of the people. It is to look after the guarded interest of the whole. It
Mm-hmm.
is to take care of the most downtrodden people that we have in our society. And as cynical and dickish as I was, I could see right wing people making all these arguments for why the private sector should take care of all these issues, but then I didn't see them actually hold anybody to account when things went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like that's basically where I just completely departed. The libertarian space also kind of became much more of a statist and more lefty sympathizing um, through that process because holy shit, like people can talk about like oh well corporations will be suable if they pour chemicals into the river. Dude, by then you have cancer, like you're dying, so what does $200,000 mean to a dying person?
Right.
And that's where I get so frustrated because I feel like there's a level of historical ignorance where people literally think like the 19th century was like a golden era for the United States of America, and it wasn't. It was a hellscape. It was an absolute hellscape where robber barons took complete advantage of the average working person, and I
Yeah,
fuck
ask the average working person right now if they want to work for company's scrit. You know, like,
yeah, dude, I lose it. I lose it a lot. And like you being a history buff probably explains a lot of why we get along because like I'm a massive history buff. I don't just contextualize what's going on in the world today. I contextualize it within like the past 1,000 years or 3,000 years of history.
mm-hmm.
So I know things are good. I know that they could be better, but I always have my eye out for like the real cataclysms because I know that they've existed and I know that they've happened. And oftentimes they were caused by predictable, selfish, shitty behavior. And that's why I'm always arguing with people because I want them I want them to doubt themselves. I want them to doubt themselves. That's like the main thing that I want, and it's not something that I see a lot with. So I'm sure you and I both deal with a lot of rhetoricians,
Mm-hmm.
people who just say political positions, and even if you present them with new information, they stick to the political position no matter what because it advances their agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I always attack people who are like that, whether they're on the left or the right, is because that lack of self-doubt is exactly how you hurt and kill thousands, if not millions of people. And
Yeah.
doubt in discourse is super important.
Well, this is another reason why, like, I go for market socialism, because I think that there are a lot of really good arguments in that direction that we can adopt at a relatively safe pace that isn't going to upset society, isn't going to change like standards of living all that much. And also, like, I don't think of market socialism as a utopia by any stretch of the imagination. Um, I'm totally open to the idea that there's something better than market socialism. I just want to make society better now with the methods that I have, have a relative certainty about making life better for people in this country.
In market stock has real world examples that work.
Right.
So for instance, Publix is a Florida-based grocery chain that invests heavily in its employees, invests heavily in their training, pays their people above average, and I think after 3 years they start collecting stock.
Mm-hmm.
So they literally have baggers who are disabled or differently abled, and they are retiring as high 100,000aires or millionaires because of their stock options that they've gotten in the company, and they sell their shares back to the company, and that gets passed on to the next generation. So there's really and it's a viable company. It's a strong company. It's growing. It grows slower than Walmart and all those other places because you're paying a premium for the atmosphere and for the
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic and for the family vibes and the quality products. But it's still a viable market model,
Mm-hmm.
and the effects on the health and well-being and happiness of the average employee is demonstrable.
Right.
And that's what I don't like. This is actually what really pisses me off about like TJ Kirk or Ben Shapiro or whatever. They'll argue for the forces of the market all day long, then they won't give a shit that Walmart is paying their people less than subsistence wages, and then they will allow the government basically to subsidize those wages through government benefits. And it's like, what kind of like fucked up dystopia are you promoting through your complete advocacy to just let these robber barons run the world?
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's where I think the right really needs a Teddy Roosevelt style figure rather than a Donald Trump style figure, where it's populist. It's still about your utilitarian function as a human being. There's still some principles there, but environmentalism should not be a bipartisan issue. Taking care of the planet should not be a bipartisan issue. Taking care of your community or your family or any of that kind of stuff should not be a bipartisan issue. And that's where I'm borderline disgusted with the right, even though I still.
When you say shouldn't be a bipartisan issue, do you mean it shouldn't be a partisan
Oh,
issue?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
partisan. Sorry. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No,
I was like, wait a
should
minute.
be bipartisan.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, like we should both agree that the average health of a family inside the United States should be a metric on which we evaluate society. And if families are falling apart, if they can't pay their bills, if kids are getting shitty education, if people are ending up incarcerated at rates that are disproportionate to the rest of society, these are problems that need solutions, and the solutions can't be the free market solves all.
Right. Well, and because we know that the free market doesn't solve these problems. Like, if it did, the problems would be solved. So, and that, I mean, you touched on Ben Shapiro, and I've been watching through a lot of Ben Shapiro content lately, and I've found that Ben Shapiro doesn't actually have many ideas. What
principles.
what Ben Shapiro does is he talks very fast and he makes a lot of claims very quickly, which is not the same as making a good argument for them. It just means he's saying a lot of things, and that's, I mean, it's certainly a way
Here's your
to argue.
propaganda real fast.
Yeah, yeah, it's a way to argue, but it's not really a way to have a genuine discussion about what should be done, I think.
No, and that's like, even looking back at the debates, like I know that you probably know the debate where like the college girl is talking to him, and they're talking about like the Boy Scouts should be boys only, and like all that kind of shit, and like the aesthetics of YouTube owning is more important than the actual message being conveyed. And I'm hoping we're kind of getting past that from like our bullshit detection meters, because even Ben Shapiro's a meme now. Like if he posts anything, there's like 50 WAP memes in the comments. Like if he posts anything, like even me in right wing circles, in right wing social media groups, there's the picture of him like making a turkey, and it's like, my wife, in parentheses, a doctor, assures me that this turkey is allowed to be this dry. And so I think ruthlessly mocking bad actors is kind of where we need to go with this. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Like, history has shown us that like mocking Nazis is one of the most effective ways of dealing with Nazis. Because like Nazis don't have logical arguments. They just don't. I've talked with them. Their arguments are pretty bad and off the rails. So like you can't reach them by presenting them factual arguments. You reach them by making fun of them.
I would, and I like that. And I actually have an uncouth concept for reappropriating homophobic language and using it exclusively to describe Nazis. But it's kind of okay. So I'll explain it without saying it. Okay, I'll explain it. If you don't like it, it's okay. I'll just explain it without saying it. You know that the fascism is derived from the term fascist, FASCES, which is like a bundle of sticks with an axe head stuck in the middle of it, and it's supposed to conceptualize that through unity there's strength. Well, there's also a term, obviously for bundle of sticks. So I like to stop using it to describe people of a certain disposition, and I would like to start using it against them. But that's just an idea, and I think
you might need some queer folk to sign off on that one first. Maybe
I am not unilaterally starting this.
Okay, yeah. You might want to let other people take the vanguard on that one.
No, yeah. I am not interested in being on the island by myself trying to do that. But the point being that mockery is a powerful tool. Language is a powerful tool. Making these people feel stupid makes them doubt themselves, which allows them to come back into the fold and wonder what's going on, that they could be so wrong. And actually, I'll DM you kind of a stronger philosopher who's a part of that movement, because I'm worried about him. I'm worried about people who do have a sense of intelligence and history, who speak persuasively, who have a coherent worldview. I'm more worried about them than the average idiot that comes to debate you on your stream. Yeah.
Also, someone in chat asks, how do we make sure that the good version of mocking, like what happened with Ben Shapiro, instead of doing the bad kind of mocking, like what SNL did with Donald Trump? And I think that's just a matter of making sure that the comedy is targeted at the person. Like at their ideology. You don't want to be laughing along with Nazis. You want to be laughing at Nazis. And I think that's an important distinction.
You have to be really, I don't have a prescription for that. I actually have more of almost a warning about that. A lot of ironic and critical art about fascists and authoritarians often gets reappropriated by the fascists and authoritarians, where they just use it unironically. American History X is like a perfect example, because Edward Norton plays a neo-Nazi in the movie and all that kind of stuff, and basically neo-Nazis, fascists, and authoritarians will use the first half of the movie as propaganda, where he's an unironic Nazi, and then they'll just ignore the second half. So that's kind of where art is tough. It's tough as hell to find something that stings. But I know making fun of Nick Fuentes for having catboy girlfriends still gets under his skin. So that's a good meme, and you can use it probably for the next century.
Is it even a meme? Is it even a meme?
It's just true.
It's just true. It's just true.
It's just true that one of the major leaders of the neo-fascist movement inside the United States of America went on a mandate with a catboy.
Yeah.
And like that's, we shouldn't judge him for going on dates with
No,
catboys.
cat
It's
boys are
the
great.
irony. Yeah, it's the irony of the leader of the authoritarian, one of the prominent leaders of the Zoomer authoritarian movement went on a date with a catboy.
Yeah.
So
Um, so, yeah, I mean, it seems like you're pretty on board with the idea of like worker co-ops being a thing. What I guess what are the things that prevent you from just being like, yeah, come over to the market socialist side? You know, what are the
I'll tell
hurdles?
you. So let's say that we pass legislation tomorrow,
Hmm.
and we literally say every single company inside the United States of America has to be a worker co-op. What happens when people tell you no?
Right.
So whether it's the companies themselves or their employees who have been propagandized to believe that this is in their worst interest.
Hmm.
What happens when capital, because capital is global now, what happens when capital pulls out of your country and you see a tanking of the economy because you've now enforced legislation that was supposed to improve the lives of citizens? So this is, I am not of the opinion that socialist societies only tank because of international capitalist intervention, but at the same time, let's just assume sorry, I'll keep talking while I find my headphone again.
Okay.
So let's just assume for a second that I'm a pure lefty, and I believe that Venezuela was just a perfectly run society. Venezuelans are worse off now because they tangled with capital. So the goals of the revolution and the goals of the political movement and the goals of the advocacy are now being completely destroyed. And the social unrest that has resulted from it is terrible. So why would I advocate for that in my society if it's going to destroy it? And that's kind of like I guess slave morality or something like that. But I'm a utilitarian, so I'm looking
Right.
for the utilitarian calculus of how to improve society without killing everyone.
Yeah. So this is why I'm not an advocate for Thanos snapping all businesses into worker co-ops. I think that that's something that infringes on a lot of people's personal freedoms as well, and I'm not a fan of that. What I am a fan of is having programs that provide startup investment into worker co-ops, because that's largely one of the main hurdles, right? When you are starting a worker co-op, like the reason we have so many agricultural worker co-ops is because there's built-in capital to that. So farmers can get together and form co-ops far more easily than someone, say, working at Walmart can. Um, and so having like a federal program that allows startups to help kind of create more worker co-ops to over time shift our economy towards a worker co-op one. And then also like policies like if we have to step in and bail out a company, like we had to bail out the auto industry, we had to bail out Boeing. We've had to bail out so many of these different companies. And I think one of the objective things about worker co-ops is that they benefit like their local communities more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for example, your factory, if it's a worker co-op, isn't going to vote to move to China or like Mexico or any of those other places because your employees aren't going to want to collectively move to Mexico. Generally, maybe there's like some fringe example where that could happen. Um, but I think it makes sense for if the government is putting money into this thing, have something that objectively benefits the public more. And if it benefits the workers more, if it benefits the government more, then it makes sense to invest in these things. Um, and I think over time that could be something that leads us to having a predominantly worker co-op society. I mean, I'm in favor of
Well,
setting these gears into motion, and I think that that would be gradual enough that where like if there is some hidden flaw to worker co-ops that we haven't discovered yet, we can figure it out on the way.
and just to even simplify with another solution that I would be completely on board with is just tax incentives. If you're a worker co-op, you're taking care of your people, you're paying them a living wage, you're sharing profits, zero taxes. because you are already taking care of your people. You are already making sure that they're not, you know, I don't want to say drain on society. I know that's loaded, but you're already making sure that they're living a decent wage, a decent life. They can probably afford their bills. They can probably afford to pay for their mortgage. They can afford to have a family. You are already promoting the well-being of the society. So as a result, we are not going to take money from you in order to redistribute it to the rest of society. And that's actually what I think would be interesting, because a lot of corporations are going woke now, where you know they're doing some of it is virtue signaling, but some of it actually is financial redistribution, where they're taking care of their lowest employees because they know it's bad PR for their employees to be on food stamps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could probably incentivize a decent chunk of companies to basically do employee stock, do higher wages, do these communal democratic kind of things, and that's where I don't mind the social pressure of socialists at all, or the cultural pressure of socialists at all. What I'm more worried about is there's and maybe this is bad meme or whatever, but AOC plays Among Us with Hasanabi. You know what I'm saying? And I get Hassan Piker is kind of a meme, and he's a goofball, and he does weird shit and all that kind of stuff. But Hassan Piker is somebody who unironically flies the Soviet the hammer and sickle, and he talks about fucking the eye out of American soldiers and like all that kind of shit. So what I'm always worried about with alleged sock dems and lib socks and ancoms and all that kind of stuff is that when push comes to shove, when it comes down to actually advocating for their ideology, they do have larger sympathies for tankies and authoritarianism than they give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And that you could say the same thing of the right? Like the libertarians, push comes to shove, they're going to side with fascists over the left. This cuts both ways, but it's still my fear, and it's why we can have a good conversation, because I feel like you're a good faith person who's trying to advocate for your political positions as best you can. But if you get on another stream and you're flying the hammer and sickle and you're talking about how Stalin's a cool and based guy, then I'm going to be like,
yeah,
you got me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like, and this is one of the reasons why I don't adopt like the hammer and sickle for my online presence. I think that there's a lot of like toxic communication when it comes to that, and like sure, to a certain extent, there's a lot of memeing that goes on the left, but I think that memeing can be harmful when it comes to communicating your message, or like the optics of it are just absolute poison, I think.
It's why I won't come over. Like seriously, like it's part of the reason why I won't come over or commit, is because it's like for all I know, it's the same thing with the right. So and I'll try to keep this brief, but
yeah, no worries.
The right wing was talking about like libertarianism and free speech, and the economy should work, and all these lefties just want handouts and like all this kind of shit. And it wasn't talking about what the right wanted to do. It was talking about how bad the left was. And then what ended up happening was I signed on to a whole bunch of, political groups and just memes, right? Like just memes, just jokes. And then what happened after, like a year after Charlottesville, was the Groypers decided that they wanted to take over the right wing as much as they could. And Groypers just means the Nick Fuentes American nationalist movement. And they basically said, you're either with us or against us. You're either for traditional conservative Christian values or you're not. You're either for authoritarianism or you're not. You're either for Trump or you're not. And I was like, I'm not for any of that shit. Fuck you. But like, I'm not jumping on the bandwagon with you. But that social pressure dragged a lot of otherwise like centrists and libertarians to be more authoritarian, to be more like virulently anti-left, to be more reflexively anti-progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my thing. I'm anti-progressive because I'm anti-woke scold, but I'm not anti-progressive when they're trying to make the world a better place. And I think that's the distinction.
Yeah, and I think that there's like I find it very interesting that you would advocate for like a 0% tax on like worker co-ops. I think that's even like I think that might be too far even for me. Like
Wow.
I think I'd be okay with taxing worker co-ops, but
Reduced. They can have
Yeah,
tax. Oh, okay. Here
tax
you go.
breaks, sure.
Yeah, 10% tax, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not an effective tax break. So you know the way that corporations can write off everything now?
Mm-hmm.
Those people can write off their taxes too, as long as it's like going to the benefit of the employee.
Yeah. Or I'd even be in favor of like just when you're starting up, because it can be really hard to cover and make ends meet as like a worker co-op startup.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, lifting the tax burden on startups, I think would be really good. Um, but yeah, I think these are really interesting things that we could talk a lot about, like, and get lost in the weeds on. When it comes to memeing, it's I think it's a bit different on the left than it is on the right, just because there's a lot of like propagandizing on like that makes people initially lean more conservative, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like whether it's knowing about what socialism is or whatever. And I think that there is a certain amount of memeing on the left that speaks to the way people get disenfranchised or like are alienated by our system, by capitalism. You know, it's tough to be a worker who's like barely making ends meet, who can't afford health insurance, and then you see like, you know, Jeff Bezos has like his 43rd space mansion. You know, like it's real. It's there is this element of uh fuck these people. And you know what? I can get behind that. Like I get it. I get it. I get why people would be angry. I think
It's
I
it's okay. I'm a right wing person. When all my bills are paid and the second a bill is late, it's like, oh, eat the rich.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and most people are in the position of constantly struggling. Like even before the pandemic, most people didn't have $400 to spend on unexpected things. And like I had my gallbladder out last year. That was an unexpected expense that cost me $3,000. So and that was with insurance. So like
the
there is a deep amount of dissatisfaction with our system, I think, for the vast majority of people in this country.
and the right has failed. It really has. If you were thinking about like because I bought into the bullshit, so I'm a Republican because I care about the Republic. I'm a Republican because I care about the Bill of Rights. I'm a Republican because I believe that people should be self sufficient whenever possible. I'm Republican because I think we should build a healthy society in which people are capable of being self sufficient. But that's not what Republican means anymore. Republican means fuck everyone, social Darwinism, let the poor eat each other, and if society is slowly spinning into favela style disparate poverty, then that's not on me because I'm doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So fuck everybody else. And that's where they've really lost the plot because there's lefty arguments that just work fundamentally. I think we spend 24% of our private GDP on healthcare. Canada and the UK spend 17%. Universal healthcare is a no-brainer, and the fact that it's not a bipartisan issue is dumb. And it's mostly for rich people who are afraid of getting poorer care than they're getting right now. It's not for the general well-being of society.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's the same thing with wages, progressive taxes, reducing military spending, increasing social spending, utilitarian calculuses for how we prevent people from getting into jail. It's all this Darwinian bullshit where the rich just don't care about the human beings. They just don't care about you if you're poor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the kind of person that will always get by because I'm white, straight, productive, can make money, all that kind of stuff. But I care about the society that I live in, which I know is weird and dumb, but I care about other people. I want them to do well. I want everybody else to be happy. And I guess that's where my lefty sympathies come in.
Someone in chat wants to ask: is your take informed by VA healthcare?
My take is not. VA can. I have an opinion on the VA that's not popular, which is accurate. I think the VA is terrible, but that's because it's mismanaged, it's poorly funded, and the people there who are working there aren't happy to be there. I went to a California DMV and I got in and out in like a half hour. It was clean. The people looked happy. Everybody was nice. And what Republicans do is they will slash the budget of a social institution. They will say, "Look, this social institution doesn't work. We need to slash it even more."
Hmm.
And that's the way I feel about the VA. I'm getting an X-ray for my neck problems, not because there's not enough money to take care of me, but because it's not being run properly, borderline intentionally. So people hate the institution, so they want to fund it less. And I seriously think rich people in this country do that intentionally.
Oh,
And that's not how the entire world works.
yeah, comrade counterpoints over here. Yeah, the like that you're 100% correct. Like it's the same kind of thing with school choice. Like public schools start getting underfunded and private schools are better funded by private interests, and then they undercut the public schooling system. And you go, oh, look how bad our public schools are. Clearly we need to have more school choice so that you can go to a private school. When the reality is, if we just properly funded our schools, if we just properly funded our healthcare system, if we just had a system where everyone was in the same boat, had to use it, I think that this would be a lot better. Like if the rich people had to use the same healthcare system that our veterans do, I think our yeah, I think our healthcare system would be a lot better. I
Yeah.
think I think that would be fine.
Yeah, it's always interesting how they send somebody else, to do the dirty work. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can go die for your country, but then when you come back, you'll get shitty healthcare. Like, and that's the other thing that kind of disgusts me is they will use up, and I'm using they, so I'm not trying to be too comradey here, but rich people, people in power, the government, all that kind of stuff, they will use all of your productive energy in order to forward their own agenda. And when you're like, hey, I was loyal to you. I worked hard for you. I sacrificed my body for you. I sacrificed my mental energy for you. I sacrificed weekends for you. I sacrificed time with my family for you. What do I get in return? And they're like, fuck you, get out. And then they'll get the next person who's eager. And that's what, the myth never stood up to reality because I was a very hard worker. So I was disciplined and timely and tactful and all that kind of stuff. And I was always waiting for the big rich man to come on down and say, you're a genius, Connor. You're smarter than the best people. You deserve a good position and good money, and we're going to stick you in a position in which you can thrive and your creativity will be, unleashed. And it just never happened. And I'm still a worker bee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a well-paid worker bee, but I'm a worker bee. And that I'm getting tired. I'm in my 30s now. You are not going to get 100% of my life. I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to spend time with my friends. I'm going to do other things besides work myself to death for your benefit. And that's what I would say to younger people who might be listening. Work hard enough that you are a valued member of the employee and you get the money. But if people aren't loyal to you, you don't need to be loyal to them. So basically, like, if you actually have a worker situation where they do take care of you, take care of those people. If they don't take care of you, don't sacrifice yourself on their behalf. Do what's required, be valued, do not kill yourself for people who don't care about you.
Yeah, that's a lesson I had to learn the hard way too. Your environment Seattle in chat says, I saw someone with 20 years of experience and 15 years seniority get fired without cause today and no notice.
Yeah.
And like that's how our system operates.
Yeah.
Our system deliberately alienates people and deliberately tries to isolate you so that you can be disposable. So you can be replaced with the next eager person in line. And I personally advocate for a system where, hey, maybe we don't do that. Maybe instead we value workers, we pay them the value of their labor, and we treat them like human beings.
Labor theory of value gets a little funky for me, and honestly, we'd probably need to break it down on on another stream. But the in general, I think that solves very easily through stock options and and employee ownership of the company. So the
Yeah,
labor theory of
and
value
no,
gets,
like I actually 100% agree with you. Like
yeah,
it's solved by workers owning the company.
yeah, and that's what I was going to say is just like having the value of the company divided up into stock that's private or that's owned by the workers. It gives them an incentive to make the company profitable. It gives them a sense of ownership in the company itself. It makes them invested in the company's future. It makes them feel like they have buy-in, that they want the world to grow. And this is kind of another thing where boss is bad, sees the means of production. I'm a secret lefty, but the my boss, who I used to work in the service industry. My boss fired my wife, who we met at this job, fired my wife for getting one complaint, and he held on to so many garbage employees, and we literally think it was like a symbolic firing. He fired all of my friends over the course of the time who were the mainstays and the pillars of this restaurant. And then we go to parties, and he acts like we're family. Meanwhile, he's like, jet setting and flying around and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, bro, you took everything that we poured into your institution. You took everything for yourself. You screwed us over when it was convenient for you. And then now you're acting like we're boys. Like why do you think we're boys? And like I'm nice to be nice, but fuck you a little
Yeah.
bit. So,
No, like and that's part of what the studies on like worker co-ops indicate. Like it's not quite enough to have like stock options. It's not quite enough to just have agency in the company. You have to have both. Like you have to be getting part of the profits of the company, and you also have to have agency over your workplace. And
yeah.
I think that that makes perfect sense. And like to be 100% honest, like that's what Marx was talking about. Like
Yeah.
it's not about like not having bosses. I think that that's like like a simplified way of thinking about it, right? You can still have a hierarchy within a worker co-op, but
Please face wall now.
oh no, I've been selected. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. And well, and see, and seriously, no meme. This is my thing. I can talk to you. I can talk to people who care about people and who want the society to function. What I can't do is I can't talk to people who are like, my work week should be 8 hours. I should be paid. Everybody should make the same. Food, housing should be decommodified. Everything should just be cleaned up by somebody else. And that's what I get worried about is this fantasy utopianism, because even in my ideal society, it's not. If automation and fusion power come online to the point that like literally robots can come wipe my butt for me, awesome, and we can have a different conversation. But
I have a lot of questions, but we can move on.
but until we live in a society in which robots are so automated and we have unlimited cheap power, until that society exists, we're going to have to work. So the question, in order just to maintain society.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how do we work in such a way that our lives are meaningful, that we have good relationships, that we live a purposeful human life? That's an important question that I think needs to be answered. But my fear is not you, it's the disingenuous lefties who are thinking that we flip a switch and we get luxury gay space communism by shooting our landlords. That's
Right.
what I'm worried about.
I do think there's a certain element to like a political movement where you kind of, especially if it's like a widespread popular movement, you do need like the kind of uh, like you said, you need to have those armed people who are willing to hold the government accountable, right? I don't think that's the same as being like pro shooting your landlord. I think there's like a big difference between those two things. Um,
Now you're just being unreasonable.
but I also don't think that it's like the idea of decommodification is one that's like too pie in the sky, right? Um, typically when I talk about decommodification of like housing, for example, I make a
Mhm.
distinction between housing for people who don't have homes and like better housing, right? So like I don't think there should be anything where we need to, you know, we snap our fingers. That the Thanos snap happens. A guy in like a fur hat comes to your door, is like, here, this man named Jeff, he live in your house now. Like I don't think that kind of decommodification is what I'm for at all. But what I am for is like building homes where homeless people can live and like stay without having to pay for them.
Let
Um,
me. I want to ask you a question because this is actually really
yeah.
it's a pragmatic thing. So let's say we build tenement housing. Got they call them projects, government project housing. We give everybody either free or subsidized rent or no. Let's just say free.
Hmm.
Okay. And let's say we decommodify food as well. So food is free, housing's free, internet's free, power's free.
Hmm.
Okay, we just do that.
Yeah.
What is preventing the entirety of the human race from living in a shit pile of an apartment, being an aspiring YouTuber, living in their own filth, not maintaining the structures that have been given to them,
Hmm.
and basically expecting that these things will be taken care of by an exterior force? And uh, I'll just
Hmm.
I'll just leave it there for now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a that the markets can do a lot of really good things. I'm not inherently anti-market, and this is why I'm for markets for certain things. Like, yeah, we can decommodify food, but maybe if you want to get those Pop Tarts, your Pop Tarts and your Mountain Dew, you want to get your PS10 so you can stream the latest games. Well, you have to go get a job at a worker co-op. Like
Yeah.
those luxuries aren't going to be provided to you. Um,
So are
and
we giving everybody gray nutrient paste to survive?
No, but I mean like loaf of bread, eggs, milk. Maybe a couple like some chicken noodle soup.
Some
Like
chicken tendies.
yeah, so your dino chicken tendies, the absolute necessities. Um,
It's weird you said dino chicken tendies because my son used to be so not picky about food, and now like dino chicken tendies or dino mac and cheese is like it's the only acceptable food except for a few other staple items.
Clearly a young
So
man with a refined palate.
yeah, it needs to be beige and it needs to be dinosaur shaped.
Exactly. So you have like the incentive built in. Like, you want to improve your quality of life, go for it. I think
But is this your opinion or is this the lefty opinion?
well
That's my question.
I think that a lot of the evidence that we have, right, of like decommodification, like where decommodification has been studied where it comes to housing,
Mm.
housing tends to be something where you invest in it and it actually saves money for your economy. Whether it's and it varies. Sometimes there is a level, like it doesn't affect the city budget at all. Sometimes
Mhm.
it saves the city money. Sometimes it saves the city a lot of money by like a scale of like every $1 you put into it, it saves the city $2. Um,
Yeah.
and so it seems to me that it's just kind of a no-brainer for this. Now, what's to prevent everyone from living in that sort of condition? Well, I think if we had a baseline like safety net like that, where if you're homeless, we will give you a home.
Hmm.
I think that then will have knock-on effects of lowering some property values, making it more attainable to rent a better apartment, buy a better house, rent a better house, whatever. Um, and
I live in a state that is not like completely out of my price range yet.
yeah,
So
yet.
I feel like I feel like a lot of lefties are actually motivated by economic pressures that come from living in states that have grown, I get unscientifically a lot.
Hmm.
So like the West Coast and like developed Northeast and all that kind of stuff. It's like God, just to live in a shoebox, you need to pay $500,000. It's
Right.
nuts. But
Well,
then sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, And I also don't think that everyone on Earth wants to be a YouTuber. Like I'm sure there are a lot of people who would want to do that,
Come
but
on.
I feel sorry.
It's a
Sorry.
glorious life. It's a glorious life. I'm rich beyond imagining. I have a beautiful home outside. I'm a millionaire with 2,000 subs.
But I think that like I think people are motivated by more complex things. If we take out the need to work in order to live, which
Mm.
you know we currently have that coercive element of capital, right? Like if you don't work, you're gonna go homeless and you're going to starve to death and die. And I think that if we remove that element, people will find different reasons to work, whether it's, you know, bettering themselves and or whether it is helping their communities, whether it is you know, expanding their knowledge and like studying, or like you know, I think there are a lot of other reasons for people to work, and there has been for a very, very long time. Like we're wired to be social creatures. Um,
You've reached a social impasse and a social bridge that I can't follow you on, because if I could pick lint out of my belly button for 60 hours a week and I would still have a decent life, I think I would. And that's unironically, I do find this a lot because I have a
mhm.
lot of liberal and progressive friends. They have a lot more optimistic and positive and kind of um, they have a more optimistic and positive estimation of humanity and
Mhm.
what's possible and what's capable and all that kind of stuff. And I am a very cynical and pessimistic person about the human condition and also what we're capable of in a negative sense. So the I think we kind of need each other, and that's where my enlightened centrist hat, goes on. Uh, we need lefties and progressives to give us something to shoot for, and we need conservatives and centrist naysayers such as myself to kind of slow the brakes on where things are getting a little bit crazy.
Mhm.
And that's where I really don't like um, this political conception that we don't need each other, or that the other side is like uniquely evil and worthy of destruction. So if you look at societies, and I'm sure you'll agree with me here, historically, whenever you've had the right wing get crazy, they try to slaughter the left. And whenever we had like authoritarian left societies, they tried to destroy the right and make sure it was completely eradicated. And I think some of these things are political and ideological and all that kind of stuff, but I also think some of these things are temperamental. So I'm not trying to make it like biologically essentialist, but I think my fear and anxiety and doubt about the human condition and what human beings are capable of could be rooted in, I don't know, some form of biology or sociology or my upbringing or something like that, whereas your optimism could also be temperamental. And I don't know, end of rant.
Well, yeah, like I think that there is a certain element of that makes sense, right? Like under capitalism right now, like how many people would just be like, I'm exhausted, I need to like sleep for a year, I'm okay with doing nothing. I think most people would, right? But I think if we were under like a different mode of production, if we were under socialism, I think that there would be a lot less incentive to push ourselves as hard as we currently do. I think that there are also a lot of studies out there where like human beings can't sit still by themselves for like 15 minutes. Like if you like there have been studies that have been done where it's like, okay, your job is to sit in this room for 15 minutes. And
Like,
like
nah.
and well like they go and sit in the room and like they're observed, and on while they're being observed, they like get so bored so fast. Like
Yeah.
they can't sit still. And I think that there is something to like that sense of like human discovery, human exploration. And I think that if we had a socialist mode of production where we actually treat human beings like human beings, and we aren't like, you know, alienating ourselves from our fellow work people, you know, we can build real friendships. And when you have real friendships, then you want to go do stuff with each other. If you want to go do stuff with each other, then you got to go get a job at a worker co-op. Like I think that there is like a lot of this connection that we take for granted right now, or that we underestimate because we've been denied it for so long.
I I hope you're more right than I'm right. Like, so, like,
Well, and also, like I am not saying again, we don't Thanos snap, decommodified housing into every city in America, but I think that we should have, in the wealthiest country on earth. I love my country. I think we can do a little bit better than homeless people shitting on the street.
ooh, dude, like you, that's what fucking drives me nuts. Like seriously nuts about the right. Like this Darwinian hellscape. Like I know you're doing well. You individually, you went to school, you got your MBA, you became a corporate hitman, you're making 300K a year.
Oh yeah,
You're
that's
driving
totally my backstory.
you're well no, not you specifically. I have a guy in my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
You're driving a Jaguar and all that kind of stuff. But don't you care that as soon as you leave your gated community and you drive into a rough apartment complex or whatever, you're worried about getting robbed or stolen or beaten or anything like that? Don't you care that when you pull into a gas station or whatever, the person who's there has bags under their eyes because they've been working 60-hour weeks because they're a minimum wage worker? Don't you care that that person's kid goes to a shit school, which they're going to be raised in a school system that doesn't function properly? Aren't you worried about that kid basically having a 50-50 shot of ending up in jail? Like, don't you care about these things? And the answer for a lot of these people, because they've been raised with capitalist sociopathy, is no. That's literally the answer. Is nah, fuck them. If they wanted to do as well as I did, all they have to do is bootstrap. But I just don't think it's an acceptable answer anymore, considering how much we know.
Hmm.
And that's where literally, like I think I mentioned like Teddy Roosevelt earlier. Somebody mentioned that he was a progressive, but he was literally a progressive Republican. So he cared about the environment. He thought that you had to break up the trusts, like the monopolies and the big firms of his day. And I swear to God, we need somebody like that.
Though
Somebody who cares about the environment, wants to break up the trusts.
I will point out that he was a conservative. He was a Republican before the ideological switch between the parties.
Right.
Um, so I I do think that like there is this element of we're in the middle of like a crisis with like climate change and like it
Mhm.
that isn't going to get better without a
What's
lot
your
a
what's
lot
your feeling on that?
my feeling.
Like what do you think is real in the next 30 years? Like what is actually going to happen? And I'm not saying like I'm going
Yeah.
to hold you to or like make you bet something on it, but what do you see? Because I think I have normalcy bias when it comes to climate change, where I'm just like, shit's been good for a while, so I can't imagine it getting much worse than this.
Right.
Uh, what do you think is actually going to happen in the next 30 years?
What actually is going to happen in the next 30 years is I suspect we're going to see a lot more situations like with what happened with Syria and the refugees. We're going to see a
Yeah,
lot more regional conflicts over scarce resources and scarce water. And I think that's going to create a lot of refugees. And like the United States lost its shit when we took in like what was it, like 5,000 Syrian refugees, like
yeah.
an incredibly small number. And as time goes on, we're going to see more climate change refugees from different parts of the world, whether that's Latin America or South America or different parts of Africa. And I think as that happens, America will largely be okay. But I think that during the time in the next 30 years, this is one of the reasons why I started my channel. Like I think
Mhm.
we need to adopt these socialist policies so that we have a strong enough safety net that we can start accommodating these people, because if we don't, they're going to become the pretext for like a new fascist movement in this country.
I was
um
about to say, you don't think fascism is the correct solution to global climate
no.
catastrophe? You don't think that like white people should just get together and advocate in their tribalistic interest and like appoint a new secular monarch to start authoritarian, death squads?
I mean, it has some appeal. No, no, no,
Is
no.
is is that is that is that a bad idea?
I would put that in the category of bad, not great, not
Yeah.
ideal,
Oh
suboptimal.
my God. dude, like, oh man, it's so frustrating. I have so many fascies because like I'm on the right, but then like I argue against like fascism or whatever. And it's like they're believers, dude. It's religious. They're just like, no, what's going to happen is we're going to get a strong man and he's going to, do X, Y, Z. And they'll never admit what they actually want. They won't
Hmm.
admit that they want like ethnic purges. No, we just want a separate place to call our own and all that kind of shit.
Yeah,
It's just
we're
like, fuck, man.
don't think about the people who are already there. Don't think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's there.
no.
It's gonna be white already. It'll be fine. Um,
Well, or they'll all move to Montana or some shit. And it's like, God, it's like half these people can't even cook their own fucking meals, let alone start a fascist superstate. So it's really frustrating because with the productive energy that they spend arguing with me, they really could solve a lot of their personal problems, and they just don't seem interested in it because it's easier to attach themselves to an online fascist super movement rather than dealing with the bullshit in their day to day lives.
right. Well, and that's what honestly fascism is what worries me the most in the future. It's like America's we have all kinds of ingenuity here. We put a person on the moon with a computer that has like 1/100th the computing power of what I hold in my hand right now.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes, allegedly. Um, and or we fake the moon landing with a
Yeah,
computer
there you
with
go.
1/100th the computing power.
One or the other, they are both impressive.
And uh, I have faith in our ingenuity to be able to handle a lot of the technical elements of this crisis, so that like life in America, parts of it, I mean, Florida's fucked with climate change. Like that it's just a foregone conclusion there.
Hey, I am 67 feet above sea level. I will have beachfront property in the next 30 years.
There you go.
I
Think
will
ahead.
pull a Ben Shapiro, I will sell it, and I will move.
um, but what worries me is how poorly this country deals with immigrants and refugees. And
Mhm.
this is why I think we need the stronger safety nets, because if we have those strong safety nets, then it's not as much of an issue if we let in a bunch of immigrants, because we have ways of dealing with them and adopting them into our society in a way that doesn't produce this kind of fascist backlash. Um,
Can I tell you a serious, serious, serious vulnerability for the left right now?
yeah,
Like
go for it.
it's crazy vulnerable. When white racists realize that they can recruit Hispanics into the fascist movement,
And it's already
that's a
happening.
it's a massive liability because I mean, so if fascists aren't entirely against the like social safety nets and like social welfare programs and all that kind of stuff, so they can steal the rhetoric and the programs of the left, but then they can appeal to recently immigrated social conservative Hispanics. They can say you're now honorarily white, and then they can incorporate them into the superstructure,
Hmm.
and then they can just go after lefty progressives, LGBTQ, black, Muslim, like all that kind of shit. And that's where I see the threat is Christian nationalism. And that's because Christian nationalism incorporates milk toast boring people like my parents, and it incorporates Nick Fuentes,
Hmm.
and they can all be drawn under that umbrella of basically like Christendom, social lefty programs, but then they can turn that into authoritarianism, and I
Hmm.
think it's a really real concern.
Yeah, and my hope is that by embracing socialism, we can instead, I guess, reduce the pull that these fascist groups might have. I don't think we'll ever like eliminate them entirely, because fascism is slippery and constantly mutates.
Mhm.
But I think that we can defang it quite a bit by having these policies that, can apply to everyone, that can benefit everyone, and that more clearly highlight like a lot of what like the good elements of immigration. Like
Mhm.
we have data on that. Like there is a lot of good data on the benefits that immigrants bring to this country, and I think that there's a reason that like we have the Statue of Liberty, And it's because we're a nation of immigrants. And I think we need to embrace that in order to combat fascism.
And let me show my chud credentials real quick.
Mm-hmm.
The There is something about being American, and almost no lefty agrees with me on it. And to me, what being American is basically constitutionalism. So the reason why I said, like, I've had this debate before: freedom of speech, right to self-defense, and limited government. And I'll try to explain it very briefly. Freedom of speech means freedom of conscience. We're allowed to express ourselves the way that we feel like without government intervention. We can socially pressure ourselves, but largely as a society, we think it's a good thing to express yourself in a truthful manner. Whatever you think is in your conscience, you should be able to say, regardless of how controversial it is. People can give you shit for it, but you shouldn't be killed for it or killed by the government for it. The right to self-defense, I have a utilitarian argument for why I think the Second Amendment is important and why an armed population balances the power of a federal government. Considering Trump is supposedly a neo-fascist authoritarian who almost pulled off a coup in our lifetimes,
Mm-hmm.
I hope that more lefties would be sympathetic to that argument that we need to balance power between the civilian population and the military. And then limited government, I don't mean like libertarian Ancapistan. I mean that the way the government functions is established by the people. We have Republican systems, we have Republican setups, we legislate, we inform our representatives, all that kind of stuff. And there's only so much that our representatives can do to inflict damage on us because of it in Republican fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a civic nationalist. I'm a paperwork nationalist. I believe all of these ideas are good and they need to be impressed upon people who come here. And that's where I get into some shit for lefties because they just say, oh, well, anybody can come here and as long as they're productive and they don't commit crimes, then it's not a big deal. It is a big deal for me that these ideas that I view as essential to the function of American society are perpetuated through the education system to the next generation. And I think without that education, this dream or idea will die.
Okay. I agree with all three of those. My main issue, I guess, is like the assumption that immigrants won't like conform because usually they do. We've found that like by second generation immigrants, usually they've fully integrated into society.
But I don't like American society. And by that I just mean like I don't feel like our people are particularly well civically educated. I don't feel like they're educated on home economics. I don't feel like they're educated on how to manage a household. I feel like a lot of the education is bullshit and time wasted. And I would prefer a better education system to make better citizens. So it's not an indictment of like I love my countrymen, I love my country, but our education system is garbage.
Yeah, I guess I tentatively agree with you in the sense
cancel now.
As long
cancel you now.
as
Please face wall.
As long as when we're talking about education and like teaching kids about this country, I am absolutely against like a patriotic education system. I want
We did nothing wrong. What are you talking about? America is perfect. The Native Americans were very generous. They gave us food when we first came here. We had a big Thanksgiving dinner. After that, we were friends for a really long time. They just let us, take California.
The end.
Mexico was more than happy to sell it to us, and there was no fight there.
Mm-hmm.
And, also Black people have been our friends since the beginning. So, yay, America.
But as long as when we're talking about teaching about American the American political system, we're talking about it in a real world context and not in like a propagandized context. That's something that irks me quite a bit. Like when Donald Trump was talking about his patriotic education system, that's something where in my gut I recoil in horror from that. I find that incredibly undesirable. I want people to learn history. And I know a lot of people
truth?
well, I know a lot of people have different ideas of what constitutes the truth, but like like I know a lot of people on the right were upset about the 1619 project or something like that. It's a valuable perspective to have
Yeah.
on American history. And like, if we're going to teach American history, if we're going to teach American politics, then we have to teach it accurately. We have to teach it with as much well-rounded ness as we can. And I think we can do that if we actually invest in our school system. Wild, no? Wild. Like, maybe we should have teachers who are properly paid for their work. Maybe we should have
Amazing.
school systems where our teachers don't have to pay out of pocket for their school supplies. Maybe we should have textbooks that aren't coming from ideological think tanks. Um, all
I
of these
am
things.
I nodded a lot for the past 2 or 3 minutes because one of the things that I recoil from that drives me crazy. So I have no problem applying like the scalpel, and I know you're saying truth is subjective, but I have no problem applying the scalpel of truth to everyone's history, and I think it's actually refreshing, but it needs to be equally applied. So we need to apply it to all factors of history. So West African, North African, American, East Asian, like all that kind of stuff. We need to have the same level of analytical truth, and we need to apply that to ourselves as well. And what bugged me, because I consider myself a smart person, but I spent a decent chunk of time in private school and public school, was I literally tried to write an essay about how America was not an expansionist, like colonial is the wrong word, but wasn't like an expansionist authoritarian society, in that like our expansion was somehow justified through some kind of just like manifest destiny or whatever, kind of thing. And what I found was, by actually studying the history, I was like, we just came up with whatever reason we needed for new territory. Like every time we bumped into like a limit, we were like, what's the excuse that gets us into this new territory? And then we took that excuse. And learning that, kind of, I still love the United States, I still love Americans, I still love our history and all that kind of stuff, but it robbed me of this delusion that we were unilaterally righteous, that we could do no wrong, that we just, every single thing that we'd ever done as a country for the past 300 years was completely morally justified. And even the subsections of like tactics and warfare and strategy, we could justify all of that from a moral lens. Learning about the Spanish American War or the Mexican American War was like, holy shit, we're dicks.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
like, wow. we just made some shit up and went for it.
Yep.
And same thing with the Native American conquest. Like, whether or not we were going to do it anyways, or there was some kind of like natural expansionist evolutionary thing, doesn't make it morally just. And a lot of the things that we did during those events, so a lot of Americans come up with excuses for why we didn't commit Native American genocide. It's not for a lack of trying, like Native Americans exist in spite of our efforts, not because of our efforts.
Right.
And I think having that perspective really kind of, you can still love your country without making bullshit excuses for it.
Right. Exactly. And like that, this is why I say, like, I'm a patriot. I love America, but being a patriot doesn't mean ignoring the bad shit your country has done. Being a patriot doesn't mean that you think your country is perfect and beyond improvement. And I
Yeah.
think real patriotism is wanting to improve your country and the lives of your fellow countrymen. Um, and so, just to answer Dan Eater in chat, I don't think that Counterpoints was saying that immigrants need to conform. There are just certain elements of like our political system that need to be impressed on immigrant, like through the immigration system.
Yeah, Hispanics don't need to enjoy mayonnaise for them to be American, and Middle Eastern people don't need to give up their food or their culture or their religion in
Wait,
order to
was
become
mayonnaise
American.
was mayonnaise the
Yeah,
only white people thing that you could think of? Was it
yeah.
the only American thing?
Yeah. What else is like uniquely white? I'm trying to think of what else besides mayonnaise, but like,
And maybe
no.
it's a mistake to say white. Sorry, American. We'll go with American. America's not a
Is
white country. We have a lot of other racial groups here.
Well, right, but and this is why I won't be on the left because I don't have to caveat, as much. I don't know. Like, no, you don't have to assimilate on things that don't matter. No, like food doesn't matter, culture doesn't matter, religion kind of matters, but it depends on how you practice it. Is it affecting other people? Are you screwing other people over? Are you treating people poorly because of your religion? That kind of thing. But the reason why I brought up those three core beliefs is because they make a plurality of beliefs possible. So if I believe that I have the right to conscience and I believe that you have the right to conscience, we can have a conversation. If I believe that I am the only person that has a right to conscience and you don't through some immutable characteristic that you can't control, I am now a tyrant in your society that is preventing you from exercising what I view as a fundamental right. Same thing with self-defense, where if I view self-defense as something that's only uniquely for me, but it's not for you, I become a tyrant again, where I can tyrannize you, the person who has a mutable characteristic that I don't like. You're not allowed to defend yourself, but I'm allowed to attack you. And then same thing with limited government. The reason why we need a limited government, not just because of Sharia law loving jihadist infiltrators into the United States. It's because we don't want Christian nationalists imposing fascism on the country. These three core beliefs are necessary for a plurality of people to live in peace, shoulder to shoulder. And my argument is, if you don't believe in these three core beliefs, then you are going to be a dick in our society and make it worse, not better. So yes, I will stand by my need for people who are coming to this country to conform on those three principles.
And I don't necessarily disagree. Now, I would
Can
say
your channel cancel you, or can your chat cancel you already? Jesus Christ.
no. I think they're generally agreeing with a lot of the points you're making. I think
Cancel yourselves.
I think. Well, honestly, you talk very much like a lefty. Like we.
I study your talking points.
So far, it seems like a lot of our disagreement isn't on actual policy. It might be on like the weeds of some of these policies, but like a lot of the policies we seem to agree on, and the main thing that keeps you from saying that you're a market socialist is like some of the aesthetics of the left, and like the unfortunate tendency to woke scold on the left.
I have genuine fears about slippery slope, and I have genuine fears about perverse incentive. Mm-hmm. So for instance, like I think I mentioned, out of the frying pan into the fire. Mm-hmm. I like these ideas. They sound good. If we can implement them into society and make them better incrementally, I'm all for them. But if they make society worse, cancel that shit. I don't give a fuck. Like I don't have a principled set of leftism that I'm going to adhere to, no matter what the utilitarian outcome is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like my general set of beliefs and the policies that I advocate for are not just because like it stems from the fact that like I think that we can have a society where, you know, homeless people don't have to shit on the street. You know, where we can give people housing, where we can have, you know, in the richest nation on earth, we can make sure people aren't starving to death. You know, in the richest nation on earth, we can make sure that there aren't, you know, 50 million uninsured or underinsured kids who can, you know, we can fix these problems. And how we go about fixing those problems, I'm open to a wide variety of different ideas. And if my ideas that I advocate for, if we find that they don't work out as we try and implement them, then I'm open to trying different ideas. But no matter what happens, these are ends that I want to achieve, and I think they're very understandable aims to try and achieve, you know?
My right-wing sympathies, and the reason why I'm not willing to just concede and go, oh yeah, I'm a lefty now, is because I have a more pessimistic view of humanity, and I am almost betting on some of these things failing because of poor implementation or perverse incentives. So for instance, let's say City of Orlando. I live in Central Florida. Let's say that we build tenement housing for homeless people, and we literally get all the homeless people off of the street inside the city of Orlando. Every single person has an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not instituted nationwide, more people come here and we don't have the resources in order to take care of them because we're a locally funded thing. But let's say that we do it, and then I could continue down the example of like real world logistical factors that would actually end up fucking up the program.
Mm-hmm.
But then also another fear of mine is that the lefty bend towards humanitarian caring and compassion does have a double edge to it, where to me there seems to be like a lack of accountability. So for instance, if a person is schizophrenic and incapable of taking care of themselves, they literally need meds in order to function.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a fuck what that person does. If they have a bed to sleep in, they have 2 hots or 3 hots in a cot, and they're able to get by, great, very happy for them. But if somebody is an alcoholic or a junkie, or their problems are surmountable, I want to culturally and socially pressure them to improve.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to be an addict for the rest of their lives. And while they're living in that housing, I would literally, under threat of force, want to force them to maintain their property. And that's because I think that there's a feedback loop between like personal responsibility and the health of the society. So that's where, we get into the nitty gritty, where we both agree that we need to take care of people who do not have enough in order to survive. But I probably get more authoritarian, where it's like, if we're going to give you the thing in order to help you to survive, you have to meet us halfway in order to show a reciprocal relationship where we're not just giving you things, we're also building a better society together.
Yeah. So and I feel like that's an understandable way to take things, especially from a conservative point of view. Where I would differ is that in this hypothetical, right, you have all these people together. That actually makes it way more easier to provide social services to help those people either get back on their feet, get treatment for their schizophrenia, get treatment for their drug addiction and whatnot. This is something that actually is really beneficial. Instead of having to like track down these people on the streets, you actually have them all in one place where you can properly address the problem, make it easy for them to get these services, and it also allows them, like if we combine it with other programs like free mental health care with free healthcare, then they can start going and getting like preventative healthcare treatments, which that lowers the cost to society too. They can start getting mental health care that lowers their their predilection possibly towards criminality. It makes them less desperate, so they don't have to commit petty crimes in order to get a meal or stay off the street. These are things that have a lot of knock-on effects to the rest of society that I think are genuinely really, really good things.
And ideally, I would want people of good faith like yourself and hopefully myself to have like these conversations on like the utilitarian calculus of how we thread the needle between helping people, making sure people are healthy, happy, better lives, all that kind of stuff. And then, I'm not going to purposefully look for a fight where I don't think there should be one, but that's kind of where I do have these takes that are more conservative. I do have some, like, I'm not religious, but I'm like a deist. Like, I do think a force set the universe in motion, and there's no faster way for me to not like an atheist than if they start shitting on like religious or spiritual people in a really cruel way. So oftentimes it might just come off as like reflexive defensiveness of conservative people because that's where I came from, and really my sympathies often are very lefty. But there are real principled and pragmatic and cultural arguments that I have that are more associated with the right, and to be honest, are cancelable. So like when I talk to, Tiffany Starr, or if I talk to you, or if I talk to somebody on Dylan Burns or whatever, there's always this, or Vosh or anybody like that. I know Vosh doesn't give a fuck, but like there's always this fear that you're going to tread on dangerous ground, and as a result, you are betraying the left. You are betraying your cultural movement. You are betraying the people who trust you with your opinions. You are betraying, the arc, the justice of the left. And I don't take that responsibility. I don't want that responsibility. I am responsible for me. I'm articulating truth as much as I can.
Hmm.
I am trying to tell you what I think will make society better. So I don't want to be a part of something that I'm in turn going to disappoint or infuriate.
I mean, yeah, I think that's fair. Um, like I I it's a difficult question, right? Like, at what point are you beholden to a community, or like at what point can people cancel you, or is I'm kind of in this camp of like, fine, fucking cancel me. I yes, please give me more publicity. I would like that. Yes, get my name out in front of every single fucking lefty.
Right.
Get my name in front of every conservative. Yes, I would. I'm a bad girl.
Riverboat Jack is an asshole. Can
Yeah.
you believe what he said? Like, he's like,
Like, I at the end of the day, what I'm interested in is not winning. It's not really even clout. Clout's good. I'm never going to turn down clout. But what I'm interested in is making society better. That's my number one priority, and that's why I made this channel in the first place, and I never want to lose sight of that goal. And if I can make society better by appealing to conservatives, if I can make society better by appealing to neoliberals or liberals or fellow lefties who aren't tankies, then I'm willing to do that. And like that's part of why I wanted to talk with you, because I think that this is like these are the kinds of discussions that we need to have. Like, I don't think it is productive to alienate someone like you who agrees with me on like 95% of issues. Just
I'll
because
say
you may
80, but it's
80% of issues.
okay.
Just because you might disagree with me on abortion, or you might disagree with me on like some other issue, or you might have said something that was cancelable 5 years ago. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about what you said 5 years ago.
We are birds of a feather in this regard, and I think the world would be a little bit better of a place if these our voices get a little bit louder. And the reason why I say that isn't to stroke your ego or to stroke my own ego, but it's because what's happening is just political factionalism, and I kind of I take this to heart. Vosh actually said like TJ Kirk tweeted out something and Vosh agreed with it, and the thing that he agreed is that like conflict is like the root of like political productivity. So you have to have a conflict in order for factions to fight over the problem and the solution,
Mm-hmm.
and then a solution to dominate. But I don't view that as my role. I don't view my role to be a faction fighting over the problem. I view my role as considering the positions of everybody involved and then trying to articulate some level of synthesis or a deeper understanding of the problem. And I think, as fucked up as I am and as twisted as the world is, I have the ability to articulate that hopefully well, and make the world a slightly more nuanced and interesting place, and hopefully contribute to the synthesis that actually makes things, better. So I don't, when Demon Mama or somebody else basically says, "Oh, well, you can't talk to these people. They'll never listen to you. They'll never change their mind about anything." Bullshit. Bullshit. I was way more right wing, way more reactionary 4 years ago. I wouldn't, a lot of the lefty thinkers who are on my radar now wouldn't even be on my radar if they hadn't had the intestinal fortitude to put themselves out there and start promoting their ideas. And we wouldn't have this level of agreement if those people hadn't done that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's value in rhetoric and good faith conversation. And frankly, I'm really thankful that somebody like you exists, because otherwise sometimes it feels like I'm just out here on my own.
Well, and likewise, because like I understand why there are other lefties who are like it's impossible to reach people who are conservative, or it's impossible to communicate with these people, because we live in an age where like 95% of Republicans support Trump, but it was something like that. It was like
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how to reach those people. But I want to be able to reach them like that. Like I think giving up is the worst thing you can do. Giving up on talking with people, giving up on dialogue is the worst thing that you can do. There are only select subsets of people and that I would even advocate just like avoiding entirely. And for the most part, I I'm a socialist. I want workers to have rights. And newsflash for everyone, conservatives are workers, liberals are workers, neoliberals are workers, and we need to appeal to these people. We need to be able to talk with them because we're trying to make the world better for them too. Conservatives also want
You are
healthcare.
such a piece of shit.
I know, right? I know.
No, but the man, and that's like, I do view myself as a bridge. I really do. I don't view myself as a partisan or somebody who has an agenda. I view myself as a bridge between these worlds because I really do try to consider the steel man of the left. I really do try to consider the steel man of the right. I try to articulate it as best I can. And the thing about it is that the reason why Republicans, like, just to explain this, I'll try to be brief, but the reason why 95% of Republicans voted for Trump or support Trump is because Joe Biden is he's the CEO of Antifa, and Hugo Chavez stole 8 million votes in order to get him elected. And if the Democratic Party wins, then AOC and the Squad are going to take it over, pass universal health care so grandma gets executed by death panels, and the economy is going to tank, and we're going to end up eating our pets. And like, I'm not kidding you, like that. Unironically, that's kind of like the perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to get past that is to have steelmen. And that's what I loved about Contra. That's what I love about RGR. That's what I love about Bosch, is because even if you disagree with them like vociferously, there are takes that I have, with these people where I'm just like, nah, like we don't agree on this one. But at the same time, they're articulating themselves in a responsible way where they're not trying to call you a piece of shit for disagreeing with them. They're literally advocating for the strength of their ideas, the best way that they can. And that is so valuable because you kind of realize, like, there's a difference between ANCOMs, LibSocs, Tankies. Antifa is not a monolith faction of domestic terrorists. It's actually an amalgamation of people from a variety of political perspectives who are all believing that they are actively fighting nascent fascism inside the United States of America. So even if you don't like that they throw cherry bombs into crowds or hit somebody in the head with a bike lock or whatever, or individuals in Antifa have done that.
Things, yeah.
Yeah, then you can still say, like, they're people trying to do the right thing instead of, domestic terrorists who want to destroy the United States. And I think continuing to put the content out there is really valuable. And the only thing that I see as lacking is intellectual curiosity. And that's where you have to make it easy for them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make it accessible, right, and aesthetically pleasing and convincing. End of rant.
So I guess I'm at the point now, like, what could I do or present to you to get you over, to get you into this socialist coalition?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it merely like a matter of implementing these policies in a slow enough way that we have better and better evidence that it works?
The utilitarian calculus, and then I know this is a very ironic statement, tanky purge, tanky purge, and I mean this from, like, aesthetically, rhetorically, a tanky and a woke scold purge would make the left so much more accessible to so many more people. Because what a lot of people, Endernax, I'm endorsing him here, but if he says something edgy, I disavow. But Endernax is a right-wing figure. He's a conservative, but he agrees with a lot of, like, what amount to progressive economic policy. You can access so much of the American market by still holding your beliefs, still holding your principles, but maybe not treating everyone who disagrees with you on social issues like trash, or pretending that religion just needs to die, and anybody who believes in Christianity or take their faith seriously just needs to jump off a cliff. The and then the tanky stuff is, like it or not, socialist. The word socialist is it's automatically associated with all of the failed authoritarian communist experiments of the 20th century. You have to address authoritarianism. You have to address mass slaughter. You have to address the concentration of power. And if your political advocacy says, we're going to concentrate power, we're going to hold it in the hands of diehard ideological socialists, but we promise this time not to tank the economy and not to kill everybody who disagrees with it. That's not going to fly.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be, and the reason why I was talking about political incrementalism is because I think maintaining democracy is the only way that socialism will work.
Right. Well, and again, I think that history has proven, like both when it comes to capitalism and when it comes to socialism, that early attempts to overthrow the pre-existing state of affairs by force is an incredibly bloody and long affair. Like, the first attempts to do it didn't succeed. And I personally would prefer to succeed via democracy. I think that is the ideal situation. If not, then we're going to get like a long period of very bloody conflict. And it's not going to be this glorious LARPy vanguard bullshit that a lot of tankies think it's going to be. And that's really my main issue with tankies, is that, like, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of LARPy bullshit. You're not going to be part of this glorious vanguard who triumphantly marches into Washington, D.C. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to be a long, brutal struggle that you are likely not going to see the end of, and our country will descend into chaos. Now, some people might just be like, "Oh, that's fine." Okay. I'm not advocating for that.
Yeah.
I advocate for democracy. I'm pro-democracy. I'm pro-freedom.
And the reason why, I don't know if you felt it, but I thought it, the reason why I was pulling back a little bit is because we view the shift to capitalism away from feudalism as morally justified in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, oh, well, any early attempts to change systems is going to have some level of like violence or slaughter or whatever, you're correct. But what like I'm bracing for and what I'm holding my breath for is, you're like, so we just need to keep trying. and that's, that's kind of the...
So I would never say, so we just need to keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
What I advocate for is to keep trying via democratic means.
Right.
But what history has shown us is that if this impetus toward revolution continues, then whether I want it to or not, there are going to be other people who attempt it. And I would rather succeed the peaceful way via freedom and democracy and keep our society intact, rather than throwing us all into the flames and hoping we come out the other side in a better position.
And two more rhetorical strong points for trying to steel man socialism, even if I'm not jumping on board yet. So advocating for workplace democracy is super strong, because it's like, why aren't we more democratic? Why aren't these decisions made more with the consent of the people who are involved? Why is it like, that my asshole boss can basically, do whatever, but then I'm held to a higher standard than he is, and he's paid significantly more? And then I think also the questioning of the moral authority of an owner. So there's, obviously that, the investment of capital and the investment of risk and all that kind of stuff, and the small business narrative and all that kind of stuff. I think that's very powerful, and it's also very powerful in the American mindset. But once a business is established, what is the moral authority of an owner to consistently extract exponential wealth from the function of his institution that he created, while leaving his employees in destitution? And I think those are not necessarily ways that like will instantly like, oh, I was a Trump MAGA supporting capitalist yesterday, but you talked about workplace democracy and how owners are assholes, and now I'm a socialist. Like, I don't think that's what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but it would breed fertile ground where people would start questioning the relationships that they have with their work, the relationships that they have with their bosses, the relationships that they have with the owners, and the economic distribution of resources. And why is it that we're completely okay with people, workers being destitute, but owners just living pretty much the lives of rock stars if they succeed? And
Yeah, like honestly, this is one of the reasons where I'm like, as a lefty, I need to reach out to people who don't necessarily agree with me, because I think the lived experiences of most people in this country back up this sense of alienation and this sense of being left out of this economic prosperity. Like, I don't know, but I don't know your background. Have you been to a small town lately? Most of the small towns in America now are just like Walmart, a couple gas stations. All the mom and pop stores have been run out of business. Um,
mm,
what if we adopted socialism and we could bring back those mom and pop stores as worker co-ops? Like, I think that would be a huge improvement over every town having a Walmart. A Walmart that can dictate the entire life of your town by
mm,
adjusting hours. Like, hey, I think maybe for both like rural America and for like city America, this is something that benefits all of us. Let's bring life back into rural America again.
yeah, and the I can't help you win all the battles, and I can't promise that I'm going to shift labels anytime soon. But what I can promise is I will always be a good faith interlocutor. What is that a
Interlocutor.
word? Yeah, you nailed it. So I'm not a rhetorician. I'm not trying to game you or your audience into thinking that I'm cooler than I actually am. The things that I'm saying out loud, they're literally starting as like electrical signals right here, and then I'm just spitting them out into reality. So there's
Mm-hmm.
no bullshit or calculus or anything like that.
I prefer people like
Um,
that, regardless of
yeah,
their political affiliation. I'm sick.
yeah.
I'm sick of people who call into my Twitch stream and are like, "Yeah, I'm a moderate conservative," and then like a half hour later, it's like, "Oops, I'm a Nazi." like, I'm sick of talking with people like that. I respect everyone who can just say their actual positions.
The Nazis would argue that since their views aren't acceptable, that they would never be palatable if they just came out with their views. But I think there's a reason for the Overton window to exist in the way in which it does, which is ethnic tribalism is the way that we ran societies for a really long time. And for a really long time, we were killing the shit out of each other along ethnic and linguistic lines. And in the recent centuries, we've been able to communicate through increasing technology and sophistication and, language barriers breaking down and all that kind of stuff. And we realized that people in different ethnic and tribalistic groups were actually also human beings worthy of some level of dignity and respect, which is weird. I know it's a weird idea, but it seems to be largely true.
Whoa, are you saying we
And
shouldn't just indiscriminately murder people who are different than us? It's a pretty
yes.
lefty position of you.
Yeah, I know, right? And what's really frustrating about that is once you readopt the fascist mindset of I'm a part of a tribal group, this is my tribal group, anybody who is outside of my tribal group is basically a representative of their tribal group that is trespassing on my territory. You have the moral pretext and a caveman brain reflex to basically excuse all of the horrors of history to be done to that person. And that is I think the reason why I punch right, but I punch right against that idea because it's horrifying. And if you look at history, it's like it's responsible for nearly every single terrible thing that we've done over the past like 3,000 years. But the reason why I punch left is because you can create a utopian idyllic society that you are willing to kill for, and anybody who disagrees with you, regardless of ethnic background, is an enemy worth killing. And that's what I'm really trying to. The reason why I'm trying to inject doubt and nuance into the political Twitch sphere or YouTube sphere is because I see people who are hooking into their caveman brain, and they're just like, oh yeah, I'm a part of a team now. The other team sucks. I can kill the other team.
Mm-hmm.
And I just see that, growing and developing. And it's like, guys, we've already done this like 10,000 fucking times, and it ends in disaster every single fucking time. Can we not? And that's my role, is to be boring and nuanced.
I mean, I don't think that's boring and nuanced. I think it's something that is an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with, right? Like, there's a reason, like, politics in, like, Constantinople were, like, arranged around sports teams. Like, there's a reason for that. And it's something that is unfortunately, like, really, really relevant. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that over time, we as a species have found better and better and better ways of doing things, and I think that one of the better ways that we can go in the future is maybe by removing that coercive element of capitalism. We can keep the markets, we can keep the good stuff, but maybe we don't have to have this the invisible hand of the market armed with a Glock pointing at people if they don't work. Maybe we can take the Glock out of the invisible hand of the market, huh?
When I will be your friend and advocate for that position, when
Whoa, you're in
either
favor of disarming? It's
no,
pretty
no, no, no,
lefty
no.
of
Hold on,
you.
hold on, hold on. I thought that was a metaphorical block. So when fusion or fission, nuclear power is so common that energy is just like insanely abundant. When we have electric batteries that just make everything work all the time, and we don't have to rely on gas anymore. When we have automation that is largely eliminating vast swaths of the market, and human beings now find themselves occupied with endless time and not much to do with it,
Hmm.
I will 100% jump on over and be like, I'm a socialist now. We need to figure out how people can live high quality lives without working themselves to death.
Hmm.
Until that day, I am a reluctant hostage of the metaphorical Glock, just so we can maintain society and not destroy it. But I am interested in the gradual improvement of society.
So
Uh,
you're in favor of gradually giving the invisible hand of the market a smaller and smaller gun.
yes, like
Okay.
like if we could be shot with like a 22 like Derringer pistol instead of like a Glock 9 millimeter, then yeah, that's totally fine, and we'll just move it down to like tasers and pepper spray, and like we'll just move it gradually and gradually more until we can all sit in our apartments, be aspiring YouTubers, have the robot machines bring us our apples. We can work out once a day in order to maintain our health and fitness, and then we can all study Play-Doh and play video games until the star burns out.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on a lot of these things. My main issue, I guess, is that I would really, really like us, if we're gonna do like this green revolution where we have to, save the planet from climate change destruction in the future. I'd really like it if that revolution could be done with worker co-ops. I would like that very much. Um, and that's my final idea that I'm gonna throw out there. But it's been lovely having you on. Even if I didn't win you over, even if I didn't win you fully over, I feel like this has been a really good conversation.
no, I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed the initial panel because I was like, oh shit, this person's smart as a motherfucker. And then as soon as you said you were a history nerd, I was like, oh, yep, that's why. So like, I'm a massive history nerd as well. I could literally study it or talk about it for hours and be completely wrong and learn new shit and still be very happy learning the new stuff. So I hope I've demonstrated, even if I've had some edgy comments, that we're birds of a feather in the fact that we're looking for like utilitarian improvements to society. We want humanity to do well. We want all people, regardless of their backgrounds or immutable characteristics, to do well, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure I have some chud takes. I'm sure I'll get canceled in the future. And I'm sure you and a couple other lefties will keep trying to win me over license wise, but I'm going to maintain my position. as the bridge to the right. I will give you good propaganda with which to reach out to the right, so you can be effective with your
Okay.
rhetoric, but I'm not going to commit to being a lefty until some of my anxieties and concerns are addressed. And that's just the way that it's going to be for a while.
Look, in,
So.
in this house, we support class and political traitors. Okay, it's fine. I appreciate you secretly arming me with this intel.
Oh God! Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm very happy because I believe in the even distribution of power. I think
There we go.
all factions should have some level of efficacy so they can advocate for themselves. So I'm an equal opportunity rhetoric and propaganda and power deliverer because I want you to do well. I want you to advocate for what you want to advocate for, not because I want you to completely destroy society, but because if you have good ideas and they win in the marketplace of ideas, then you might save us all from some, giant catastrophe.
Hell
So,
yeah.
with that, do you mind if I shout myself out
Yeah,
before I
go
leave?
go for it. Send me a message with your socials on Discord, and I can post that too.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so my name is CounterPoints. I do have a YouTube channel. It's smaller, but we're having a lot of fun and doing quite well from a growth perspective. I do consider myself center right. I mostly guns, very few limits on abortion. We might actually agree on that more than I'm hinting at. And then also, I'm still an apologist for capitalism and sometimes an apologist for American empire, which makes me right wing. But at the same time, I'm very sympathetic. I'm a sympathetic to progressive values. I'm a utilitarian. I want the world to do well, and basically, that's why I seem reasonable. Even though you will definitely bump into a take that you don't like eventually, and you can yell at me in the comments or on Discord about it.
I
And
mean,
so I'm gonna.
you
Mhm.
were pretty in favor of worker co-ops. You were pretty in
Yeah,
favor of
but
worker co-ops.
what I'm gonna do right now, just to show that I am a genuine chud, I'm gonna share my most recent video or my second most recent video, which is called Islamophobe. And what it is, it's a breakdown of my struggles in the military and law enforcement with dealing with the Muslim world, and also kind of like religion and terrorism and all that kind of stuff. It's not like a purely chud asshole video. I'm not being a dick in it at all. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to be very as nuanced as I've been on this channel. But I do articulate some of my fears and anxieties. And then actually, if you're good faith and charitable enough to make it through that video, the very next video that I did, I speak with a person from Sudan named Gassim, who is actually a Sudanese political advocate. And he worked for USAID and for the federal government. Well, I don't know if he worked for our government, but basically, he's lived in Sudan, worked in Sudan. He's Muslim. He was raised Muslim. And we talk about Islam and theocracy and jihadism and politics and American empire and all that kind of shit. And it's seriously a phenomenal conversation. So if you've enjoyed the past 2 hours, it's not as good as this conversation that we just had now, but it's a good conversation.
Do you have any like Twitter or anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, Twitter is CounterPoints, ConorPoints, and then I can try to share that link as well. But basically, I'm an asshole, so I want you to like me, but I will disappoint you, and that's all I wanna preface is I will disappoint you.
Everyone
But if you
disappoints
wanted to
everyone at some point.
I was about to say you actually had I don't doubt your lefty credentials for a second, but you were willing to go out on a few skinny branches that I think some other lefties might not be as comfortable on. So that's pretty cool.
I don't know. I feel like I was pretty. I feel like you said mostly reasonable things that I can agree with.
Okay, well, I'm happy to be mostly reasonable. I'm going to put that on my tombstone. All right, so I can't find my how to share my Twitter stuff, but ConorPoints is my Twitter handle. So you should be able to find me relatively easily if you're interested in following me or yelling at me on Twitter.
Well, it was lovely having you on.
No, thank you kindly. And I could say goodbye for another 20 minutes and just pay you compliments, but I probably will actually leave at this point.
Yeah, go get some sleep. You're a dad. You're a working man. You're a wage slave.
Yeah. I am a wagey and a wage slave, and I have a 3-year-old son, 3 dogs, and a parrot. So I am I'm drowning. But thank you for having me. Sincere pleasure.
Yeah.
If I don't get canceled in the next 2 months and I'm not radioactive, I would very much like to come back and then maybe even do a long form conversation on my channel as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm down for whatever. You take care, okay?
Awesome. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.